There we go. Hello and welcome to today's first monthly Patreon Hangout. Uh, Thank you very much for joining me today. So the idea of this event is just to have a monthly hangout where I can take requests from some of my Patreon pledges. But anyone is free to watch this, and if you're watching this live, hello. I can see your comments in the chat, and let me know throughout the broadcast if there's anything going wrong or anything like that. So I will be watching. But okay, so if you don't know what Patreon is a sort of subscription kind of thing to my channel where you can pledge to support the channel. And a lot of the review gear that I buy, a lot of the stuff that I feature on the channel, has been purchased with the funding from viewers who watch the channel and pledge on Patreon. And just to recap about some of the stuff that I've gotten, I've been able to purchase with the funding. Some of the highlights have been like the Takstar Pro 80, of course, which unfortunately, rest in peace. The first model was savagely destroyed by an amplifier, but there's that. The VSonic VSD3S, the V-Motor M100, the Audio-Technica ATH IM50, the IMO2, the Zero Audio Carbo Tenore, the Sony MDR Z7 and the MDR 1A, the Beyerdynamic T51P, and the Audio-Technica ATH R70X, among other things. All of these were purchased with the support of people on Patreon. So I again want to thank you so much for your generosity. I'm going to be putting up actually a full running balance, running total of all the stuff that I've purchased with that funding, which I'll put on my blog at some point. But it's just I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. So thank you very much. So the idea is with this hangout that I've taken requests from people who are Patreon funders, and at the end of this, just to tell you what's happening at the end of the stream, I will be performing a some lyrics from Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off," just so that you are ready for the amazing performance that you are going to be in store for at the end of this show. Sorry, I'm just futzing around here so I can actually see what's going on. Okay, so let's get right into it. The first request comes from Adam, and Adam asks, I was hoping that you could talk about what it's like to live in Australia and your views about certain things regarding the country. So, I was thinking about how to actually answer this question because it's you can talk about a lot of different things, and one of the things actually would be helpful because I live in Australia, so I'm blind to a lot of things. While I'm talking about this a bit, maybe in the comments, if you just chuck in what your impressions of Australia are, if you don't live in Australia, of course, what your impressions of the country are from an outside perspective, and I can do my best to respond to those as well. But what I can tell you, okay, so I was born in Hong Kong, and I came to Australia when I was 11 months old. So basically, I grew up here, and my Chinese name is actually Lokman. So my neighbors, when we moved to Australia, my parents were trying to choose an English name for me. They chose Lachlan because the neighbors suggested, why don't you try Lachlan? Now, Lachlan is a really Australian name. It's a really Australian name, actually. I might have mentioned this before. It's Scottish. It's actually Scottish in origin, and it means people of the lake, like Loch as in Loch Ness monster. And it referred to, I think, the Vikings at the time because they were a warlike kind of group of people. And I remember when I was working at Dick Smith, which is an electronics retail store in Australia, one of my experiences with this older gentleman who came up to me and he was really nice, and I was helping him buy a computer, and he said to me, "Oh, your name is Lachlan. I've never met an Oriental with that name before." And if you don't know, Oriental is generally regarded as a somewhat racist term. Not particularly because of anything about the phrase itself, which is pejorative, but just because of the cultural association of post-colonialism and that kind of thing. But I was going to give him a pass because he was an old man, and I suppose he didn't mean anything about it. But I just thought it was sort of funny at the time. What I, that doesn't set the tone for what I think about Australia. What I can say is that I haven't traveled the world. I've been to Hong Kong and Europe. I haven't been to the United States or Japan, so I can't really make a great deal of comparisons. But my general impression is that a lot of times you hear about Australians being laid back people, and for the most part quite friendly, and that's something that I think is quite true. Some cities are friendlier than others. Some places are friendlier than others because if you go to the tourist destinations in Australia, they obviously hire hospitality staff who are a bit nicer. So when I've gone traveling within Australia, say to Tasmania or Melbourne, I've generally found them to be more friendly than people in Sydney. But then again, I don't go to tourist places in Sydney. So it's always difficult to get a read on any particular place. There's a lot that's constantly talked about Australia being an egalitarian kind of place. So there's a sense that there's a bit of that we often have this idea of uh, it's suggested that because of Australia's history as being a prison colony, and again, if you don't know this, Australia was originally founded as a place where Great Britain would ship off the criminals because they would give them the option of going to jail or to go to this crazy new place which they wanted to populate. Uh, I mean, there were originally people living there, but they wanted to populate it. Um, and they shipped off a bunch of prisoners there. And the suggestion is that a lot of Australian culture comes from that origin, a sort of anti-authoritarianism, a sense of resistance to class or social hierarchy. So you often hear of Britain as sort of a very class-based society, and Australia, I'm not going to say that it's not a classless society, but people do kind of take pains not to appear to be too uppity. Um, and there's a when I was reading about this, there's a name for this actually, and it's called tall poppy syndrome. Uh, and tall poppy syndrome is the idea that you cut the tall poppies in the grass. So if they grow too high, you cut them off. And the idea that so, of the Australian definition, Peter Harcher of the Sydney Morning Herald, which is a local newspaper here in Sydney, writes Australian citizens know that some among them will have more power and more money than others, but according to the unspoken national ethos, no Australian is permitted to assume that he or she is better than any other Australian. How is this enforced? By the prompt corrective of levelling derision. It has a name, the tall poppy syndrome. The tallest flowers in the field will be cut down to the same size as all the others. This is sometimes misunderstood. It isn't success that offends Australians, it's the affront committed by anyone who starts to put on superior airs. And I think that's actually a fairly accurate and a fairly insightful comment about Australian culture, and maybe it sort of informs a lot of the way I think about things. It's the idea that we, I mean, it is another sort of pejorative term, but we like to call people wankers in Australia, and that means to you know, but everyone is at great pains to avoid appearing like a wanker, even if you're uh, extremely wealthy or extremely powerful. We try to avoid that generally in Australia. And recently we just had this is getting a bit into the politics, which is not something I really want to do. But recently, for example, there's been a controversy about the Australian Speaker of the House, and she has been forced to basically resign because she was taking helicopter rides on the Australian government on taxpayer-funded helicopter rides to private fundraising events for herself. And technically, it may or may not be within the rules. There's some sort of argument about that, but the general impression is that the politician in question was living beyond her means on the Australian taxpayers' dime, and it was quite extravagant of her to take helicopter rides and limousines to operas and stuff like that uh, as a public servant. Well, I don't know if she's technically a public servant, but she's at least paid by the public. Um, so that is a local political scandal that might give you some idea if you look up Australian speaker on Google News. I suppose you can read up on that particular controversy. The sort of flip side, the sort of unfortunate flip side that's been suggested about this whole tall poppy syndrome, because it's nice, right? It's nice. I think it's nice that we have this sort of resistance to elitism in Australia. It also means that there's a suggestion that we don't really tend to reward really talented individuals in certain fields. So, we have lots of sports heroes, and everyone can get sort of behind a sports hero because we tend to think of sport as an application of natural talent or natural ability, but we don't tend to celebrate, scientists or any other, you know, very wealthy or very talented or very uh, amazing figures in Australian society. It's very hard to tell. We have a decent amount of Nobel Prize winners, but we don't really know who they are in Australian society. At least I don't. And it's been suggested that we we bring up a lot of bright people in Australia, but a lot of them actually end up leaving the country because they can go to places like the United States or China or places like that where they can be where their talent can actually be leveraged into something quite quite innovative. And that's also because Australia is a very small country. It's also worth being aware of that. It's a huge continent, but it's a very small country. It's a very small. Um, it's got a population of just over 20 million people. It's very sparse. A lot of things that can work in other places. So my experience of going to Hong Kong uh, is the total diametric opposite of my experience of living in Australia. Because in Hong Kong, it's a lot of people in a very tight space. A lot of things act very different. A lot of things work very different here. In Hong Kong, because you have economies of scale, because you have a bunch of people who can live in a very tight space and they're able uh, to do certain things, like have headphone stores all over the place because there's enough of a market in a small localized area. It's not the same in Australia. You have a very wide, spread out bunch of people. Public transport, for instance, is not is has to be subsidized because it's not exactly a profit-making enterprise compared to say Hong Kong, where the MTR Corporation just turns over money and basically prints money over there. It's very different. The other thing about Australia is that I had to say we're renowned for our mineral wealth and we're renowned for a great environment, a really healthy place to grow up in. But we don't really, I can't. There's not a great deal of other things that we can say that we're at the forefront in the world at, and I think that there's a constant awareness of Australia as being a small fish in a big ocean, um, which we try to kind of navigate around, I guess. But yeah, that's a little bit about living in Australia. There's other things I could go into, and there's things about Australian history, some nice things, some not nice things. But it is, of all the places I've been to, I I think that Australia has got most things right, and I really do enjoy living here. I've thought about, you know, what it would be like to live in the United States, and I'd like to visit there one day. But my impression from looking at it from overseas is that I'd rather stay here in Australia, at least for now. But yeah, if you have impressions of Australia, please pop them in the chat because I'm be interested to hear what the public perception of Australia is overseas because I generally tend to hear it's either shrimp on the barbie kind of stuff, and that's like a meme that's pretty old by now, but I don't really know what the modern day impression of Australia is these days, if there even is one, if even people do think about our small little nation. But anyway, okay, so the next request from Eric, uh, he asked that I talk about an animation that I watched recently. So recently I actually went to see Akira on the big screen. So there was a cult movie event that's being held by one of the biggest cinemas in Sydney, and I went to watch Akira. That's a very famous Japanese animated film. Um, I have actually forgotten the exact date of the animation, so I should probably look that up. That's something that I should have had in my notes. 1988. Akira was made in 1988. Science fiction action thriller film directed by Katsuhiro Otomo. Right. So Akira is one of my favorite movies. I've seen it before, and I really wanted to see it on a big screen. Uh, and it's one of the few, and for a while it was considered the last. It's no longer. I think Red Line is now taking up that same sort of thing. But Akira was completely hand drawn. There was no um, there was no use of digital layering or anything like that. It was pure cell shading, and it was one of the last animations that was done purely by hand drawn cell shading. And there's such a amount of consummate artistry in Akira. When you watch that film, they went to so much effort for every single frame. There are scenes when they do things like a glass window exploding, and they've animated each individual shard as it floats to the ground, or slow motion. There's a lot of violent scenes in the movie, but even those are kind of beautiful in a way of someone rolling off a motorbike, and they animated frame by frame of someone tumbling in slow motion across the road when they go through the tunnel. Normally in animations these days, because it's very difficult to draw perspective, 3D perspective through a tunnel. So when you go through the tunnel on the motorbike, they usually just use computer graphics to warp the perspective. In Akira, they didn't. They hand drew what it would look like to go through a curving tunnel and actually have liquid flow through the tunnel, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful movie visually, and I do encourage people to see it. My impressions of seeing Akira on the big screen, besides it being a really beautiful movie, what I would say is that recently, and this probably only makes sense if you've watched the movie or not, I realized that the ending actually, this time around, I realized it doesn't actually make sense. The ending doesn't, it's not a very satisfying ending in the movie, unfortunately, because the manga wasn't finished at the time they made the movie, and I do plan on sort of reading the manga now because I'm really interested. The other thing that I really sensed this time around, and it was really cool because I was watching it with an audience, is I realized Akira is actually a funnier movie than I remember just watching it alone compared to watching it in a group, because you realize that there are a bunch of little things in the movie that make a whole bunch of people laugh. Uh, a lot of little jokes and in the characters' expressions and stuff that are really, really quite fun. And the other thing that I sort of picked up from the movie, and I don't know if this is like that's a minor spoiler or not, but the Colonel in Akira is really not a bad guy. The Colonel was in fact probably the one of the nicest guys, or at least the most honorable people in the entire movie. And it's really funny because the movie then kind of suggests, because it depicts a post World War III Japan that is struggling to go through reconstruction, and the entire political system is falling apart, and there's student protests everywhere. The movie sort of suggests, because the Colonel is such a authority figure, that that fascism is actually a valid solution to the problems of that given society, which is sort of funny, and I'd be interested to see what the manga take on that is. But yeah, those are the things that struck me. Each time I watch the movie, I get a little bit more of an impression. And I just want to bring up a comment from Adam in the chat. Adam says Justin Bieber has 3 times as many Twitter followers as the entire population of Australia. Uh, I don't know. I don't have the numbers on hand, but if that's a real statistic, then it I don't know what to feel about that. Um, but I would like to see if you got 60 million Justin Bieber fans together on the same continent and ask them to build a society. I'd be really curious as to how that society would work. I would wonder if you would end up having shrines to the great Bieber, or whether it would be sort of like a Mad Max sort of situation, except you have people playing Baby Baby. Is that Baby Baby? I don't even remember any Justin Bieber songs. Is Baby Baby a name for a Justin Bieber song? I don't know. Um, if iMovies Full says audio is desynced for me, that is sort of frustrating. I'm not too sure I can do too much about the audio um, being out of sync. I think it might recover if you watch the stream a bit, but I can't do anything about that unless I sort of just drop the stream, and I don't know what happens if I do that. So please forgive me for the lag. Uh, okay, so the next request is from Jason. And Jason says, "Hey there, Lachlan. First time doing something of this sort, and it's quite exciting. My question is concerning the general trend of consumer products moving towards wireless interactions, in particular headphones. I personally have never owned one, but I'm curious about your experience with them. Number one, do you think they are worth the extra cost versus their traditional counterparts? Number two, are they really more convenient considering that you have to charge or pair them? And number three, given the choice of two identical headphones, one wireless and one wired, which would you pick?" Okay, so here's my sort of perspective on that. Um, I generally don't find cables to be an issue on a headphone, uh, unless the cables are really bad quality, right? If the cables are tangly or they're gross and when you curl them up they end up going like spaghetti, then yeah, I would love having no wires compared to having wires. But if they're nice quality cables, I don't have to really worry about the way they kind of bunch up or if they're not too heavy or whatever. I don't mind having not having cables. I mean, I don't mind having the cables, and so not having the cables is a bit of a luxury. Now that said, there are situations where I think wireless headphones are much, much better, right? And particularly for workout headphones, I think wireless headphones are a really good idea because when you have wireless headphones, when you're working out, you don't have, if you're running around or you're in the gym, you don't have the wire bouncing around, pulling on the headphone, and it adds a bit of weight. It's a little uncomfortable. It adds additional cable noise. Um, it is one less thing to worry about if you know, you're kind of navigating the machines or the free weights or whatever. You don't have to worry about the cable being yanked out by the weight machine or something and damaging the headphone. So I have, and I never ended up doing a first impressions video of it because by the time that I was going to do it, I thought I might as well do a full review. But I have this pair of Jabra Sport Pulse wireless headphones, and I really, really like these for the express purpose of working out. These were quite expensive. They were around 200 Australian dollars. And the other thing about these wireless earbuds is that they have an inbuilt heart rate monitor. So the idea is that it can, track your actual calorie burn and your intensity of exercise during the thing. So that's part of why they cost so much. But they're quite comfortable. They isolate quite well. The sound is chunky. I would say it sounds a lot like a Sennheiser CX 3.0 or something. So it's not amazing audio quality for the price, but I can definitely see the advantage of the wireless headphones in that situation. Now, I wouldn't pay a great deal of extra money for a wireless headphone unless it was a workout headphone. In that case, I would feel like it's appropriate to pay more money for that. But yeah, it's really a luxury unless you for specific situations. Also, if you're a very active individual, I suppose not having a wire would be convenient. Um, okay. The other thing I should point out is that a lot of wireless headphones, um, you do have to charge them, but what's nice is that they basically connect via Bluetooth, and most of the times your phone will tell you how much charge is remaining on the device, which is helpful. Anyway, the next request is from Morgan. And Morgan says, "How's it going with you? It's good. I hope it isn't too late to submit a request. It's not. I really love the work you've done with your channel, especially with the music streaming podcast and the audio file series. And I've got the sense that a lot of people do have like the more sort of a non-review content on the channel, and I've been thinking about how to do more of that. And I've been saying that for a while, but that is something that I'd like to press on with. But Morgan adds, I do actually have some requests that I wish for you to talk about, but I felt like it's such a small topic that I don't know whether or not it would be considered a topic by itself. And Morgan actually has about 5 topics here. So this should fill up some time. I will not respond in full to every single one of these statements, but number one, uncompressed music formats. Morgan asks, what's your source of getting high fidelity files like FLACs legitimately and illegitimately besides getting from some CDs? Sometimes I do feel that the industry is still tightly dependent on CDs for high fidelity file formats. For instance, the iTunes store is just 256 kilobits per second and no alternative to go higher, which really irritates me. It'd be lovely if you could suggest any websites or web stores that provide these types of services. Now, I've actually responded to this question a few times, but what I can tell you is you can get lossless files from bleep.com. I get a lot of releases from bleep.com, so that's bleep.com. You can get a lot of electronic music releases there. You can get a lot of other kind of alternative music releases. Maybe that's just kind of the music I listen to, so I quite like that web store. You can get stuff in WAV or FLAC, or they have 24-bit releases now, which if that floats your boat, you can get those as well. They cost basically the same amount, so I just get the 24-bit releases generally, just for future transcoding purposes. I would also recommend bandcamp.com. Bandcamp.com has quite a lot of independent music releases from small bands, but also a lot of artists are now selling their albums directly on bandcamp.com. And you can get high fidelity FLAC and ALAC releases there, stuff like that. Adam suggests in the chat hdtracks.com. There's that as well, but their catalog is not really something that interests me generally. But yeah, if you are a bit more of a sort of, I guess, traditional audiophile, I think you would find more releases on HD Tracks. All that said, I do like getting lossless music. I prefer to have lossless music on the hard drive on my computer at home because hard drives are cheap. If there's anything in the future that's not, we have a new version that's not MP3 or AAC. We have a new audio format, then we can transcode from our lossless libraries into this new format without too much quality degradation. We don't have a generational quality loss. So I do prefer to get lossless files for the computer. That said, I really, if I can't find a lossless release, I really don't have any issues getting something from the iTunes store, 256K AAC, just because it's from as far as I can tell, doing the test that I have done, that I cannot tell the difference between that and lossless files. So, it's no biggie. It doesn't irritate me too much. Oh, the other thing I should point out, you can get some releases from Mora.jp. If you are interested in anime music, you can get some WAV releases of anime soundtracks on Mora.jp. You had to use a VPN to buy stuff from there, but yes. Okay, so the next comment from Morgan is actually vinyl records. What do you think about them? Do you think it's realistic or worth giving it a shot? If you have experiences with vinyl, what sort of players do you recommend beginners try it out? I don't. I'm not really interested in vinyl. I don't really have the room in this place to have vinyl. And to me, I understand the romanticism of vinyl, like that idea of having a big, like that ritual of putting on a CD and playing it and then just sitting down and listening to it, I can understand because it makes music into a sort of event as opposed to just something you just throw on casually from a list of music. And I can definitely understand that in the same sense that there's a certain a ritual involved in putting in a CD into a player and watching it spin up and the music starts. There's something quite nice, and I imagine that in 20 years' time, people will be using mini discs and CDs as the same sort of reverence. That said, it's not really something that I'm super interested in because uh, it's theoretically meant to be higher quality because it is meant to be a. If you had a perfect ideal vinyl recording, then yes, it would technically be perfect quality. But in reality, vinyl is not going to be high fidelity than a digital release because you have the issues with physical imperfections in the vinyl players, blah 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 blah. There's a reason why we switched from vinyl to digital, but that is very much beside the point. I don't think that fidelity, or I hope that fidelity is not the main motivation behind people choosing vinyl. Um, Third comment from Morgan is a DAX. And he says there are a load of choices in the market and it really confuses me which DAC to get. Could you give us a guide on what to look for and recommendations? Now, this is actually something that I'm looking into myself at the moment because I have to get a replacement for the Geek Pulse unit that I had. So I've been doing some amount of research in this space. But generally, I don't think a DAC should make that much of a difference, and I wouldn't worry too much about a DAC. If it's properly implemented, it shouldn't really sound very different from another properly integrated DAC. Now, there are some special things that some DACs have that other DACs don't. For instance, the new ESS Saber DACs have this interesting thing where they have internal volume control. So, software volume control actually controls the internal data path on the DAC chip itself, which means that you don't get a lowered signal to noise ratio when you decrease the volume. But in practice, I think that that probably won't actually won't lead to tremendously audible improvements. Um, my recommendation is still for DAC is the ODAC from JDS Labs, preferably integrated with the um, Objective 2. And I will be getting a JDS Labs element with this month's Patreon funding, or partially funded by this month's Patreon funding. So you can look forward to seeing that on the space. Okay, so uh, next question from Morgan is actually Chinese music. I'm really curious to know what kind of Chinese artist music you are listening to. I actually have to say I don't really listen to Chinese music. Um, I don't really know how to begin to find Chinese music, for one thing, because I can't read Chinese, so I don't browse Chinese websites. Um, and I'm much more likely to come into contact with Japanese music than Chinese music because I watch anime, and so you do end up uh, encountering a lot of Japanese releases there. My dad listens to a lot of Chinese love ballads. It's really funny. My dad never listens to music at home. He would he would have CDs in his car, and we could tell that he listened to them, a bunch of Chinese love ballads, but he would normally never play the music uh, when we were in the car, and I think he was sort of embarrassed about that, which is sort of funny. These days, because eventually I just started pressing going, oh, what's in your CD player, Dad? And I start playing it, and I think he's gotten used to. I think he's gotten used to that, so now it's okay. He plays music. He actually plays DVD music on his car, so it actually plays these music videos, not when the car is moving, but it's a Honda and it has a little screen, so it plays these Chinese music videos when it's stopped. Uh, and I don't know, maybe I don't have a great impression of Chinese music, but I tend to think that Chinese music hasn't evolved musically, or it hasn't kept up with sort of instrument trends and that kind of thing as much as, say, K-pop or uh, I would say K-pop is actually much more progressive in terms of the way it's incorporating elements from different other musical genres. It's more progressive than even J-pop. A lot of Japanese pop music, I find, um, hasn't really hasn't really progressed a great deal. Um, but yeah, no, I don't know of a great deal of Chinese music. And his last comment from Morgan is, do you mix music often, and am I making covers? I don't really mix that often. I did get a keyboard as a sort of experiment, and I do want to know more about music production. I haven't had a chance to work on anything recently, but it is something that um, I've totally enjoyed doing, and I would like to pursue it more in the future. Um, I think it does give you an appreciation. I did it just so I could get a better understanding of the other side of headphones, just in the same way that you can really geek out over cameras, but until you start taking photos, you might not really understand some aspects of them. In the same way, making music gives you a different perspective than listening to music when it comes to headphones. Um, but yeah, keep an eye on that. I do have a SoundCloud account. If you haven't checked out some of the stuff that I've played around with, some experiments, I do have a SoundCloud. And the link to the SoundCloud is, let's bring it up. It's soundcloud.com/Lachlan likes a thing. So nice and easy. Soundcloud.com/Lachlan likes a thing. And you can check out some stuff. Okay, so we come to the end of this stream and the feature event. Which was to, I actually had two people request that I do this, and that's probably because I suggested that I might do it. So you'll have to forgive me, but it's to pick a song, and Adam suggested pick a random Taylor Swift song and sing it. Now the only Taylor Swift song that I really know is actually Shake It Out, or Shake It Off rather. So, oh, I maybe should have done this at the beginning, because after talking for like an hour, my throat is sort of not doing too well, but I have here the lyrics to the song because I haven't memorized them completely. I do generally do a pretty good job of memorizing lyrics. But anyway, I won't sing the whole song because it will probably get from the stage where it's funny at the beginning and then it starts getting awkward. So I will just sing a few verses from the song, um, and you can enjoy my performance. Okay. I stay out too late, got nothing in my brain. That's what people say. That's what people say. I go on too many dates, but I can't make them stay. At least that's what people say. That's what people say. But I keep cruising. Can't stop, won't stop moving. It's like I've got this music in my mind saying it's going to be alright. 'Cause the player's going to play, 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 play. And the hater's going to hate, 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 hate. Baby, I'm just going to shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, 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 break. And the faker's gonna fake, 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 fake. Baby, I'm just going to shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. But yes, that's probably enough of that. I would actually really love to hear someone do a really good Nixon impersonation and sing this song because it sounds like a good song. Um, if you can imagine Richard Nixon singing "Shake It Off" on the White House lawn before he's carted off in a helicopter doing the victory sign, because I can't do a very good Richard Nixon impression, but it seems like the sort of thing that would really go nice with his blubbery kind of diction. Um, and if you've never seen, yes, Rohan says this is uncomfortable. I told you it would be uncomfortable. Eh, You really have to, with this music, with this kind of music, you really have to have backing. Otherwise, if you have a single person singing it, it's sort of distressing. Now, uh, I actually quite enjoy that particular song. I do find it is a catchy song, and Taylor Swift obviously does a better job than I do. Um, but some of my favorite lyrics from this song, the bit when she just goes into the dialogue, Just think while you've been getting down and out about the lies and the dirty, dirty cheats of the world, you could have been getting down to this sick beat. My ex-man brought his new girlfriend. She's like, oh my god, but I'm just gonna shake. And to the fella over there with the hella good hair, won't you come on over, baby? We can shake, shake, shake. Um, if you watch the music video, there's actually a great amount of there's actually a great deal of self-consciousness about the track, which I quite like, and it is sort of like a track that I do think of when I read some particularly nasty YouTube comments. So I can't say that it hasn't made some sort of impact in my life. So Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off" that is my tribute to that song. Anyway, at this point, I might just end the stream, or at least I'll end. This is going to be the cut point for the end of the stream, and I'll hang around in the chat and talk to you a bit afterwards. But my plan is to do these as monthly hangouts. So if you have any specific requests, again, if you are a Patreon subscriber, and that's again patreon.com/Lachlan likes a thing. I really appreciate your support. Your contributions help, you know, basically pay for the gear on the channel, and it makes doing this whole YouTube enterprise thing just a little more, little less crazy rather. And I've been sick recently, so I haven't really been able to do new videos, but thankfully I'm over the worst of that. So it's been really great, and I look forward to seeing you for the next hangout. Now I'm gonna hang around in the chat for a bit longer, but I'm just gonna put some music up. Thank you so much for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Bye.